Hello, my name's Darla, and my parents didn't just forget to invite me to my sister's wedding. They banned me. They laughed behind my back, told relatives I was unstable, even made up a name on the guest list to replace me. But what they didn't know was that her fiancé worked for me. And when he stood up and said, "She's my boss," everything unraveled. But why would a family go that far? Why erase someone who never stopped giving? What else did they twist? What more did they hide? Let me tell you the story. Because being shut out was just the beginning. It was just past midnight when I got home, kicked off my heels, and collapsed onto the couch. My laptop was still open on the coffee table, glowing against the rain-smeared windows of my Seattle apartment. I wasn't planning on checking Facebook. I never do this late, not when work has drained every cell in my body. But something made me click. Maybe intuition, maybe boredom, maybe some mix of both. And there it was. A glossy banner across Bryony's page. Countdown to the Whitmore wedding. Her grin was practically surgically attached. The caption read, "Surrounded by love, family, and everyone who truly matters." I froze. She didn't text me, not once. Not even a courtesy. "I know we haven't spoken, but..." I scrolled down. Over 200 comments. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen in over a decade. "Can't wait to see you, Bryony." "So proud of you, sweetheart." One of them added, "So glad the whole family will be there." The whole family? I didn't even know the wedding had a date. And now it was set. Lake Tahoe, 2 weeks from now. Everyone tagged. Everyone invited. Except me. I didn't feel tears, not yet. Just a strange kind of numbness, like I'd stepped out of my own skin and was watching someone else's life from across the street. I closed the laptop without saying a word. From the kitchen, I grabbed my phone and stared at the contact that still said Mom. I tapped once. It rang. Voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, just saw Bryony's getting married. Nice of you all to forget I exist." I set the phone down next to the sink. My reflection in the window caught me off guard. I looked composed. Too composed. Like I was pretending to not care out of muscle memory. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. Sleep didn't do much. I sat at my desk, went through work emails on autopilot, until I remembered something. Weeks ago, I'd sent a wedding gift, a luxury spa voucher engraved with Bryony's name and mine, wrapped with a handwritten card. At the time, I told myself it was the mature thing to do. A peace offering, maybe. At least something that said, "I'm still thinking of you, even if you're not thinking of me." I pulled up the FedEx tracking page. Delivered. Signed by front desk. All standard. But something wasn't sitting right. I dialed the wedding venue. Pretended to be confirming for a cousin from out of town. The receptionist was polite, cheerful even. I asked casually if the gift basket with the spa certificate had been received. "Oh, yes," she chirped. "That was such a thoughtful present. Ms. Bryony Whitmore must be so excited. It came labeled from her. Really sweet gesture." I blinked. "Sorry. What name was on the sender line?" "Bryony Whitmore." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the screen. I didn't shout, didn't curse, just grabbed a notepad and wrote down the name of the woman I spoke to and the time of the call. I'd learned long ago, when your history keeps getting edited, you better start keeping receipts. A few hours later, after a meeting that I barely remember, I stepped into the shower, letting the hot water dull the ache in my chest. I remembered the first time Dad said it, back when I moved out at 17. "You chose ambition over family." He said it like I'd committed treason, like chasing stability and a life outside their orbit was some kind of betrayal. But even now, a decade and a half later, I still sent money home. For Mom's dental work, for Bryony's graduation trip, for their leaking roof. I never asked for thanks. I just wanted to feel like I still belonged somewhere, like I wasn't just some blip in their timeline. I toweled off, wrapped myself in a robe, and stood in the fogged mirror. I could barely see my face. Fitting. Maybe they never wanted me back in the picture. Maybe it was easier for them to build a new version of the family without the inconvenient piece that didn't fit. But even ambition didn't erase my last name from their bank account. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because my mind was too sharp to rest. Like it had finally realized I wasn't being dramatic, or paranoid, or sensitive, like Bryony always used to whisper when she thought I couldn't hear. No, this time it was clear. I had been intentionally shut out. By sunrise, I was dressed, laptop open, pouring black coffee into a mug that read, "I'm not bossy, I'm the boss." A gift from my old assistant. She thought it was funny. Now it felt more like armor. My phone buzzed, an automated alert. Transfer complete, $600 sent to Whitmore household. That payment had been recurring for over 5 years now. My mother didn't ask for it. She didn't have to. I just knew they were always short. Insurance gaps, Bryony's car repairs, the emergency dental visit that strangely never came with a receipt. I stared at the confirmation screen longer than necessary. They could ignore my calls, skip me on the guest list, even pretend I'd moved to another continent. But they didn't mind letting my money through the door. Every month, like clockwork, they let that piece of me inside. Quiet, unnoticed, taken. It felt like a parody of family. At lunch, I stepped away from my desk and found a quiet corner of the office. I opened my email and drafted a message to the wedding venue coordinator. I told her I was double-checking dietary details for a cousin, completely made up, and asked if she could forward me a digital copy of the RSVP list for confirmation. It was risky, sure, but polite lies were practically the family dialect. 10 minutes later, it arrived. I scanned the PDF slowly. Luther and Thelma Whitmore. Bryony Whitmore. Pages of names followed, dozens of relatives I hadn't seen since I was 20. But I wasn't there. Instead, I found Dana Whitmore, from New Jersey, labeled as younger cousin, gluten-free. My fingers clenched the mouse tighter. Dana. That wasn't a typo. That was a replacement. A fictional stand-in with a safe, dull name. Someone you could introduce to the neighbors without raising questions. I closed the file and pushed my laptop aside. My mind raced, but my hands were steady. I wasn't even angry. Anger would have meant I still cared what they thought. No. This was strategy now. I took out a pen, scribbled Dana's name in my notepad, and circled it. Underneath, I wrote, I wasn't just removed, I was rewritten. By early evening, I had a one-way flight booked to Reno. I didn't plan to attend the wedding, not in the usual sense, but I needed to be there. I needed to witness the final act of a story I'd been erased from. Before shutting down my computer, I went to the drawer where I kept a small wooden box. Inside was the guest list I printed, a copy of the $200 gift receipt, the venue contact. I tucked it all into a slim leather portfolio. And then, the earrings. White pearls. Simple. Classic. A gift from Mom at my college graduation. To remind you that you're always our little girl, she'd said. I held them in my palm for a long moment. I didn't cry. I placed them gently in a travel case and closed the clasp. It clicked with the finality of a lock turning. I didn't need to decide whether I'd wear them just yet. But they were coming with me. The next morning, I was standing in line at TSA when my phone rang. Mom! I stepped to the side and answered with a voice that sounded almost cheerful. Hey, Mom! There was a pause, too long to be natural. Hi, honey, I wasn't expecting to catch you. I figured, I said lightly. I just saw the wedding is this Saturday. Another beat. Yes, it all came together very quickly. Did it? I let that sit for a second. Funny, because the post had over 200 comments. Some of those RSVPs were dated 3 months ago. She inhaled, sharp, fast. Bryony said you were probably too busy with work to come. I never said that. Silence. Then, in a voice so soft I had to lean in just to catch it. I didn't want to stir anything up. You've always seemed far away, Darla. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was familiar. That twisting of words, that way of making the problem feel like it belonged to me. You drifted, you disconnected. You were just too much trouble to hold on to. I've never been far, I said. You just stopped looking. She didn't answer, and I didn't fill the gap. After we hung up, I walked toward my gate with a new kind of clarity. I wasn't going to storm the wedding. I wasn't planning to start drama or demand an apology, but I was going to be seen. They didn't have to say my name on the guest list, but they were going to remember it before this weekend was over. I slid into my seat by the window, pulled my jacket over my shoulders, and closed my eyes. I wasn't going to crash the wedding. I was going to reclaim my name. The plane landed just before dusk. By the time I checked into the hotel near the lake, the sky was already washed in those gold and blue tones that make everything look softer than it really is. I wheeled my bag past the front desk, nodded to the receptionist, and headed up to the room without lingering. I didn't need a welcome drink. I didn't need warmth. I just needed space to think. The hotel room was clean and neutral. Too neutral. Pale beige walls, minimalist art that didn't say anything, and silence so perfect it made my ears ring. I dropped my things, opened my laptop, and pulled up the wedding itinerary Bryony had sent out to her circle weeks ago. Not to me, of course. I got it through someone who assumed I was already attending. There it was, every detail laid out like clockwork. From the rehearsal dinner to the sunset ceremony and the lakeside brunch. Everything carefully planned, down to the music and menu. I skimmed the page until I got to the family acknowledgments section. With love and gratitude to our parents, Thelma and Luther Whitmore. To those who raised us, shaped us, and continue to guide us. That was it. No mention of siblings. No acknowledgement of the sister who paid for the security deposit on their house when Dad was behind on taxes. No thank you to the person who bought Bryony's plane ticket for her first job interview in Boston. They had left me out of the future and quietly edited me from the past. I closed the document, locked the screen, and decided to step out for air. Downstairs, the small cafe in the hotel lobby had just emptied out after a wedding party pre-dinner. I grabbed a tea and took a seat in the corner. That's when I heard someone say my name. Darla Whitmore? I turned and saw her, Abby Clark. She'd been in my homeroom all 4 years of high school, though we hadn't talked since graduation. She wore a badge now, event photography assistant, with a camera strapped across her chest. I gave her a polite nod. It's been a while. Are you here for the wedding? I paused. Sort of. Abby gave me a look I couldn't quite read, part curiosity, part apology. She glanced around, then leaned in. I don't mean to stir anything, she said, but I figured you should know. Bryony's been showing people an email, from you, from a few years back. My spine straightened. What kind of email? She said it was to explain why you weren't invited. Something about needing space. She told us you'd had a hard time, emotionally. Abby winced. She said you admitted it yourself. I thanked her, trying to keep my face steady, but my hands went cold. After a moment, she excused herself to rejoin the staff team. I sat there, frozen, the steam from my tea curling between my fingers. Back upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my laptop again. My fingers moved without thinking, searching my sent folder by keyword. It didn't take long to find it. 6 years ago. I opened the message. The subject line read, I'm sorry, Mom. The body was shorter than I remembered. A few hundred words, calm, careful, apologetic. I'd written it after my first panic attack in my mid-20s, trying to reconnect with Mom after a long silence. I know I've been distant. I didn't know how to come back after I left. I never meant to hurt you. I was just trying to survive. There was no mention of diagnosis, no dramatic confession, just an honest account of what it felt like to be the odd one out, the daughter who didn't fit, the woman they all called too much and too cold in the same breath. They had taken that message and turned it into proof that I was broken, that I was unfit for the table, unworthy of the photo wall. I stared at the words, rereading every sentence. Every line I wrote to bring myself closer to them had been twisted and handed out like gossip, like justification. I tried to explain, and they used it as evidence I was unwell. Even my regret became ammunition. I closed the email, sat back in the chair, and let the silence wrap around me like armor. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I knew what came next required something stronger than tears. I opened a new document. The letter I wrote wasn't long. It didn't need to be. Just enough to say what I meant without leaving room for misinterpretation. I am not unstable. I was unwanted. There's a difference. I signed it, folded it, slipped it into a plain envelope, and placed it beside my guest list printout in my travel folder. I made sure it lay flat, deliberate, waiting. Then I deleted the old email. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was done explaining. I zipped the folder shut, turned off the light, and slid into bed. I wasn't going to beg to be written back in. I was going to walk in as the truth they tried to hide. I woke early, not because of nerves, but because my body decided it had rested enough. The light creeping in through the thin hotel curtains was gentle, filtered through mist off the lake, the kind of soft morning glow that should have promised peace. I got dressed slowly, carefully, not to impress, but to declare. A navy sheath dress, low heels, a clean, structured look. No sequins, no floral patterns, no hint of a guest trying to blend in. By 7:45, I was parked across the lot from the venue, watching from the privacy of my rental car. The front valet circle was already bustling. Staff in pressed uniforms ushered in black SUVs and white sedans, most of them unfamiliar. A few faces I recognized, cousins from Denver, Uncle Jay from Sacramento, but none glanced toward the edges of the lot. No one expected me. I sat for another 10 minutes, not sure why. Then I opened my handbag, double-checked the folder, printed guest list with Dana Whitmore circled in red, the apology email Bryony had weaponized, and the letter I wrote last night, the one they'd never see coming. I placed the folder neatly inside my clutch. If I was going to show up unannounced, I was going to do it without flinching. I stepped out into the crisp air and walked toward the valet tent, not toward the main entrance. Not yet. A young man in a headset gave me a quick once-over. "Vendor?" he asked, looking at my black folder. I didn't correct him. "Staging's around back," he added, pointing with his clipboard. "Thanks," I said, but didn't move. That's when I heard it. "Darla?" The voice was low, confused. Not someone calling out with joy, but like they'd seen a ghost and were trying to make sense of it. I turned slowly. Calder Knox stood by the valet kiosk, holding a navy blazer over his arm. His eyes widened as if he needed to blink twice to be sure I was real. "You know who I am?" I asked, not cold, just clear. His mouth opened slightly. Yeah. I transferred to product ops last fall. We've passed in the Seattle office. I didn't expect to see you here." I nodded once. "Neither did your fiancé, apparently." He rubbed the back of his neck. She told me you were a friend of the family, from childhood, said you'd moved away." "A friend," I repeated. "That's generous." His face flushed. He didn't argue. I took the printout from my bag, handed it to him. "That's the guest list." He looked down, saw the name, Dana Whitmore. "And this?" "Is who I became." He looked at me, something shifting behind his eyes. "You're not here to cause a scene, are you?" "No," I said. "I'm here to witness one." For a moment, we just stood there. Guests continued filing in behind him. Laughter echoed from inside. The world kept moving like it had every right to. "I feel like I walked into the middle of a chapter I didn't know was being written," Calder said quietly. "You did," I replied. "She just didn't want you to know the prequel." He hesitated. "You should come inside. This doesn't sit right." I handed him the second paper. A copy of the email Bryony had been circulating. My own words, twisted and misused. I saw his eyes flick over the lines. "She said you'd been struggling," he muttered. I was. So I reached out, and she used it to erase me. He held both papers awkwardly, unsure what to say. "I think you deserve better," he said finally. I shrugged. "She deserves to live in the story she's been selling. Let's not interrupt her performance just yet." He nodded, reluctantly, and walked toward the doors. I didn't follow. Instead, I stood near the garden path, partially hidden behind a line of hedges. I watched as Calder stepped inside with the papers still in hand, swallowed by a crowd that hadn't even realized something had shifted. As I waited, I caught my reflection in a decorative glass panel near the walkway. Not glamorous, not broken. Just there. Like someone who had finally stopped asking to be let in, and decided instead to stand where she couldn't be ignored. This time, I wasn't waiting for someone to call my name. I had brought it with me. Let them finish setting the stage before I speak. The sound of distant applause filtered through the hedges like muffled static. The ceremony must have ended. The timing was right, sunlight starting to lean golden, voices getting louder near the reception doors. I adjusted my grip on my clutch, took a slow breath, and stepped away from the garden path, just as Calder reappeared from inside. His steps were quick but controlled, like someone trying not to sprint in dress shoes. He found me near a column of trimmed boxwood, eyes flickering with something between apology and urgency. "I spoke to her," he said without preamble. "I didn't ask who." "She said you're unpredictable," he added, "that you once threatened to sue the family." I let that sit a second. "Did she also mention why?" He looked down, then back up. "No. She said she didn't want to relive old wounds." Her tone, it told me not to ask further. A humorless smile pulled at my lips. That's her specialty, using vagueness like a shield and guilt like a leash. Calder exhaled. "I get it now, at least more than I did 5 minutes ago." "I'm not here to crash anything," I told him, "but I'm also not leaving until the narrative has a crack in it." He hesitated, then pulled his phone out. "I probably shouldn't show you this, but you need to see it." He tapped the screen, turned the phone toward me. It was a video, grainy, slightly shaky, likely taken during last night's rehearsal dinner. Bryony stood near the bar in a white silk dress, flanked by 2 bridesmaids. Her voice came through clearly, as if the phone had been closer than it should have been. "She always thinks everything is about her," Bryony said, sipping her drink. "Honestly, if she shows up, someone should have security ready." The brunette beside her laughed, chimed in, "Wait, are you serious?" "I'm dead serious. She's not family. She's a liability," Bryony replied, like she was talking about a broken chair, not her sister. The clip ended abruptly. I said nothing. Calder looked at me, unsure if I would break or boil. Instead, I blinked once. I'd say I'm surprised, but she's always been good at turning people into warnings. His voice dropped. Why would she do this? To her own sister? "Because rewriting me costs her nothing," I answered, "but admitting I still exist, that I've succeeded without needing her, that's expensive." He nodded slowly. "She's been saying you distanced yourself, that you disappeared and cut ties." I gave a tight shrug. "I stopped playing her game. That's not the same thing." We stood there in shared silence until I heard my father's voice bark an order to a waiter through the back exit. Calder stepped aside without being asked. Luther Whitmore appeared seconds later, crisp in a charcoal suit that didn't suit him as well as his authority used to. He saw me, but his expression didn't shift. No surprise, no shame, just irritation, like I was a gnat that had flown back into a clean room. "Here we go," I murmured. He stopped 2 feet away. "Is there a reason you're wandering around like you belong here?" he asked. No attempt at pleasantries. "I do belong here," I said calmly, At least as much as Dana Whitmore from New Jersey. His jaw tightened. All I want, I said, is the truth. The truth? He echoed. Truth is, you were always trouble. You stir things up. You complicate everything. We didn't want that walking into Bryony's future. And by that, you mean me. He didn't deny it. You didn't want anyone knowing you had a daughter like me, I said. His lips twitched. Not quite a smirk. More of a defense mechanism. You made your choices. Yes, I said, and you made yours, including rewriting me out of every part of this day. He didn't reply. He turned as if to leave. But before he could step away, I reached into my clutch, pulled out the envelope from 2 nights ago, and slipped it into his inner pocket. He stopped mid-turn. It's not for now, I said quietly. It's for when you're ready to stop pretending you only had one daughter. He glanced down but didn't remove the envelope. Then, without a word, he walked off, straight-backed, unbothered, or trying to look like it. I stood there, not moving, not blinking. Something inside me didn't ache the way it used to. There was no hunger for acknowledgement, no silent begging for him to turn around. That had burned off years ago. What was left was a clean, cold certainty. Let them pretend they've silenced me, until I take the mic myself. As I stepped back into the venue, the reception was already in motion. Glass clinked, silverware tapped against porcelain, and soft jazz played beneath the hum of conversation. My heels didn't make a sound on the carpeted floor, but the weight of my presence felt louder than a shout. I stayed near the entrance. I wasn't there to join. I was there to observe. The lights dimmed. A hush swept over the guests as a projector flickered to life on the far wall, displaying a slideshow titled Bryony Through the Years. The first image was of her in a high chair, covered in birthday cake, followed by toddler dance recitals, graduation shots, and vacation candids. Faces I recognized filled the screen. Friends, cousins, family. Then came the photos that should have included me, but didn't. One in particular hit harder than the rest. Bryony at 8, wearing my old blue and white polka dot dress. I remembered that day. It was our grandmother's birthday, and Mom had asked me to let Bryony wear the dress since hers was stained. I gave it up without fuss. In the photo, Bryony smiled wide, captioned, Bryony, 8 years old, always the star. Always the star. As if I had never even been in the room. My throat didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. What I felt was colder, steadier. They hadn't just erased me, they'd repurposed me. I turned, walked out of the ballroom without drawing attention, and followed the hallway to a smaller staging area near the coat check. There, a young woman in a headset stood organizing programs and timing cards. Excuse me, I said. She looked up. Yes? I held out a small white envelope. Could you please give this to Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, quietly, before the toasts? She hesitated, eyes flicking to my dress, my face. It's not a threat, I said gently. Just information. You can even say it's from a friend of the family. She nodded slowly and accepted it without further question. Inside that envelope were printouts, 5 years' worth of bank transfer receipts, notes written in my own handwriting, for Mom's physical therapy. Hope this helps with the roof. Tell Bryony congrats on the new job. This should cover the first few months of rent. Nothing dramatic, no accusations, just facts, dates, amounts, signatures. I didn't wait to see their reaction. Instead, I walked calmly back through the hallway, re-entered the ballroom like I belonged, which, in some way, I finally did. I picked up a glass of champagne from a passing tray and moved toward the edge of the room. Guests were back to chatting now, the slideshow winding down. Someone laughed too loudly near the dessert table. A man raised his glass toward a bridesmaid. Then I caught it. A voice, low but sharp, carrying just enough. Is that her? A woman asked. The one Bryony said might show up uninvited? A second voice replied, She doesn't look crazy. She doesn't look like family either. I turned my head. The speakers weren't looking at me anymore, already on to the next thing, but the words landed like a stone tossed into still water. I didn't flinch. I just kept walking. Near the far exit, Calder appeared, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "They're rattled," he said under his breath as we passed. "Your father left the head table 10 minutes ago. Bryony." She stopped smiling. I didn't stop walking. "I didn't say anything." "I know," he said. "You didn't have to." We stepped outside together, where the mountain air felt fresher and less staged. "Did they read it?" I asked, meaning the envelope. He nodded. "Your mom looked like she'd seen a ghost. Your dad just stared. Then he got up, didn't say a word." "And Bryony?" He gave a tired laugh. "You hit a nerve, and from what I saw, there's not much left under it." We stood there a moment longer, two people connected more by accident than choice. "You didn't deserve to be left out," he said finally. I looked ahead, where the sun was setting just over the lake. "I didn't come to be welcomed. I came to correct the record." He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. They wanted to pretend I was invisible. But I brought the receipts. And now that they'd tried to rewrite my past, I was ready to confront their version of the present. After Calder disappeared back inside, I stayed in the shadows a few minutes longer, letting the cold air ground me. The stillness helped. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't afraid. What I felt now was sharper, like the click of a lock turning from the inside. The music from the ballroom shifted to a softer tone, signaling the end of dinner. Applause rippled briefly, and then the gentle clatter of plates being cleared filled the silence. It was the lull, the in-between moment before speeches began, the quietest part of a party just before everyone pretends to pay attention again. That's when Calder stepped to the microphone. I didn't see him do it. I only heard his voice cut through the hum. "Before the next toast," he began, steady and professional, "I just want to acknowledge someone who wasn't on the guest list, but who showed up anyway." The entire room hushed. I opened the door to the ballroom, just wide enough to watch. Heads turned. Bryony, perched at the head table, froze with her champagne flute halfway to her mouth. Calder continued, "Her name is Darla Whitmore." The silence turned electric. "She's not just a guest," he said. "She's my boss." There was a collective shift in the room, as though the floor had tilted slightly and no one was sure how to stand. You could almost hear the internal scrambling. "Boss? What do you mean, boss? Isn't she the one?" Murmurs broke out like wildfire. Bryony stood slowly, the smile on her face stiff and shaking. "This isn't the time for sideshows," she said, her voice tight. Calder didn't flinch. "No, it's the time for truth." Someone near the center table pulled out their phone, angling it toward the head table. Bryony tried to speak again, but whatever she was going to say dissolved in the tension. I stepped into the room, but not toward the mic. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out a small Bluetooth speaker, and connected it to my phone. No announcement, no warning. I tapped the screen and let it play. My father's voice, clear and unmistakable, filled the air. "Don't come back. You were never my daughter." The room didn't gasp. It stopped breathing. The audio ended. Just 10 seconds. Enough. I turned off the speaker, slipped it back into my bag, and walked straight down the center aisle, between tables of people who hadn't seen me in a decade, past uncles who used to call me bright kid, past aunts who once gave me hugs on the porch at Christmas. No one reached out. I didn't need them to. I kept my gaze forward until I reached the exit. Behind me, the room began to stir. "That can't be real." Did he actually say that? I thought she just didn't get along with them. Someone whispered, "That was cruel." I stepped outside, let the night air meet my skin like water on fire. Calder caught up seconds later, his expression unreadable. "They didn't know," he said. "Most of them. They had no idea." I nodded once. That was the point. Bryony had spent years controlling the story. The dutiful daughter, the absent sister, the ungrateful black sheep. She told it often enough that no one questioned it, but all it took was one line of unfiltered truth, and the whole thing cracked open. Inside, I knew the whispers had begun. Knew my mother was probably crying, or pretending to be confused. Knew Bryony was scrambling for the next version of events. And my father, well, he'd walked out the moment the audio played. Typical. "They'll spin it," Calder said quietly beside me. "They'll say you edited it, or it was out of context." "I know," I replied. "And what will you say?" "Nothing," I said. "They don't need my words anymore, just my silence." He exhaled through his nose, nodding. "You didn't come here to be applauded." "No," I said. "I came to stop hiding." There was a difference, and the people inside, every single one of them, would go home with a different understanding of what family really meant. Not the framed photos, not the monogrammed napkins or choreographed father-daughter dance. Family was what you fought for, what you refused to be erased from. Let them think the story still belonged to them. They had just learned, very publicly, that they weren't the only ones holding the pen. But even truth has a price, and I was ready to pay it. Back at the hotel, I didn't collapse onto the bed. I didn't cry in the bathroom or replay the moment over and over. I walked straight to the desk, took off my earrings, slipped off my shoes, and powered up my laptop. There was still work to do. The bank portal opened with a familiar login screen. I clicked into the Scheduled Transfers tab and scrolled through the list. Each one stared back like a paper trail of silent forgiveness. Monthly transfer to Thelma Whitmore, $600. Annual birthday gift fund, $200 each March. Emergency family support savings, Bryony's name listed in the notes. I hovered over the cancel button on the first item. This, I whispered to no one, was my way of staying part of something that had already let me go. One click, then another. Each confirmation felt like a thread being cut. I typed a short note into the memo field of the final canceled transaction. "You taught me to keep giving. I finally learned when to stop." When the last transfer was deleted, I sat back and stared at the clean slate. Not just financially, but emotionally. They had always taken without ever truly receiving me. It wasn't generosity anymore, it was self-erasure, and I was done funding my own disappearance. The clock glowed 11:17 p.m. I pulled out the hotel stationery and a blue ink pen I kept in my travel pouch. I didn't draft. I didn't pause to edit. I just let the words spill exactly as they needed to. The first letter was to my mother. "I hope you stay well. I mean that. I hope your health holds. I hope your garden blooms this spring. But I will no longer allow your silence to cost me what's left of my self-worth." The second was shorter. To my father. "You were never required to like me. But I did expect not to be lied about. No daughter deserves to be erased. You raised a woman who turned her back on what you taught her, and thank God for that." The third, to Bryony. "You always wanted the spotlight. I'm handing it to you. The whole room saw it. Every expression you faked, every deflection, every half-lie dressed up as grace. You got your stage. Just don't expect me to clap from the audience." I folded each note neatly, placed them in plain white envelopes, and stacked them side by side on the desk. 3 closures, 3 truths. No ceremony. I didn't sleep much that night, but I wasn't restless. I was just empty in the way a house feels once you finally take down the holiday lights after leaving them up too long. The work was done. The color had faded. Now came quiet. 3 days later, I was back in Seattle. It was early afternoon, and I was standing by the large window in my apartment, watching a cold drizzle streak down the glass. My suitcase sat untouched in the corner. The folder from the wedding still zipped shut, untouched since that night. I tapped my phone screen and scrolled through my to-do list. One item stood out, already overdue. I dialed HR. "Hi, this is Darla Whitmore," I said. "I saw that Calder Knox submitted a request for a lateral move. I'm calling to approve it." The woman on the other end thanked me, confirmed the transfer would be finalized by the end of the week. "And one more thing," I added. "Please make sure he isn't penalized for what happened. He didn't take a side. He told the truth." That mattered to me, more than I expected. After I hung up, I stood still, letting the rain speak against the glass. Calder had been the only person in that entire wedding who hadn't tried to edit the moment or buffer it with excuses. He saw it, called it what it was, and let it stand. He didn't defend me because he cared about me personally. He did it because it was fair. I didn't know what would happen between us from here, but I knew that kind of integrity deserved room to breathe. I walked into my bedroom, took the last remaining object off my nightstand, a leather-bound notebook labeled "Family" with contact information, birthdays, anniversaries, and placed it in a drawer I didn't open often. I wasn't throwing it away. I was just putting it where it couldn't interrupt my peace every time I reached for a charger. Then I picked up my phone again, opened my contacts, searched Whitmore. One by one, I deleted the entries. No dramatic swipe, no hesitation, just quiet goodbyes. After the last one disappeared, I looked at the blank screen for a long time. I didn't walk away because I hated them. I walked away because they chose what they wanted to believe, and I finally chose myself. And now, I'd made mine. 2 weeks passed. The flowers from the wedding had long wilted. The hashtags faded, the tagged photos quieted. But the silence wasn't peace. It was something different. The kind of hush that hangs in the air when people don't know what to say, but can't stop thinking about what they saw. That morning, I was standing in my kitchen, pouring coffee, when my phone lit up with a text. Unknown number. "Sweetheart, I thought you'd passed. That's what Bryony told me. Or joined some group in Oregon?" Aunt Muriel. She used to send me postcards from Arizona, back when people still sent those. I stared at the screen for a moment, letting the words settle. "Passed?" That was the story. I typed back, "No, Muriel, I just got tired of being erased." She replied with a heart emoji and, "I always liked you best, you know." And somehow, that made me smile. Not because it changed anything, but because even a misplaced sentiment is better than silence pretending to be polite. Later that afternoon, as I cleared out my inbox, a message from the wedding venue popped up. It was an automated thank you email, offering feedback, and a link to download the digital program. I clicked out of habit, not interest. The file loaded, formatted, branded, clean. I skimmed quickly until a familiar line caught my eye. Video submissions. Updated list. Beside mine, "Do not play, per Bryony." I didn't feel insulted. Not really, just affirmed. They didn't want my voice, but they got my echo anyway. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is stay visible when they've tried to make you disappear. The next day, I stopped by the boutique where I had ordered Bryony's wedding gift months ago. I needed a copy of the spa card for tax purposes. The woman behind the counter smiled politely. "Oh, of course," she said, pulling up the order. "I'll reprint the certificate. Was it under the name Brooke?" I blinked. "Sorry?" She tilted her head. "The engraving. With love, from Brooke Whitmore." My stomach tightened, not from pain, but from confirmation. "That wasn't her name," I said evenly. "Can you change it back to the original?" She apologized, nodded, and reprinted the correct version. As I took the card and slipped it into my bag, I realized something brutal. Bryony hadn't just cut me out. She'd installed herself in my place. And the truth was, people let her. At work the following Monday, the pace returned to normal. Project reviews, budgeting meetings, vendor calls. It was grounding, necessary. I was mid-email when I heard a knock at my open door. Calder. Not flowers. No dramatic apology. Just a binder in his hand, a respectful nod. "HR confirmed the move," he said. "I start with the West Division next week." I nodded. "Good." He paused, then added, "Thank you for not making it harder. I leaned back in my chair. Don't thank me for respecting a boundary. That's the baseline. He gave a half smile. Still, not everyone would have handled it the way you did. I've had practice. He nodded again, then left without ceremony. There was no tension, no weight, just two people who had been forced into each other's stories and decided to leave room for dignity. That evening, I walked through my apartment slowly, noticing the things I hadn't in weeks. A chipped mug by the sink, a sweater tossed over the back of the couch. Life, mine, uninterrupted. On my desk sat the envelope from the boutique, with the corrected spa card inside. I opened it, ran my thumb over the engraving. With love, from Darla Whitmore. I placed it into another envelope, sealed it, and addressed it with no name, just to be opened when truth matters more than image. Then I tucked it into the back of a drawer. I wasn't going to mail it. That would imply I needed it seen. No, sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's simply not needing them to know you're fine. And if they ever say my name again, I hope it tastes like regret. But I won't be waiting to hear it. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is not shout. It's choosing to walk away with your head held high, because the fight isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about no longer needing to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. I spent years trying to earn a place in a story that was never mine to begin with. I sent money, made space, bit my tongue, all hoping that one day love would sound like my name again. But what I've learned, what I hope you take from this, is that self-worth doesn't wait for permission. And silence? When used wisely, it speaks louder than apology, louder than proof, louder than revenge. To anyone watching this who's ever felt like the invisible one in their own family, I see you. You are not ungrateful. You are not dramatic. You are simply tired of being erased. And if you've made peace without making noise, I hope you know, that's a kind of bravery too. So tell me, have you ever been left out of a family story that was rightfully yours? Or maybe you've been the one to rewrite your own. Drop A in the comments if this touched something in you. Or just type 1 if you're still finding your voice. Let me know where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story. And if this video stayed with you, even just a little, subscribe to this channel for more real stories about healing, boundaries, and becoming who we are, with or without the family photo. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you in the next one.